In this video, we're going to be discussing how to inspect your engine oil filter for engine damage. So we had a truck that came in with very low oil pressure and a knock, and here's the oil low pressure codes, and we suspected it had obviously engine damage if it has low oil pressure. And when this happens, the first thing you're going to want to do is remove the oil filter and inspect it for damage. So step one is to drain the oil out of the oil filter, which I always do even if I'm just doing a service. And I do it with this long alignment pin that's been sharpened to puncture the bottom of an oil filter. And then you just whack it with a hammer and it should drain the oil out. Now this is on a CATS E13, but any canister type filter you can do this with. And you will be able to inspect the filter to see if there's any damage to the engine. So, see the oil's draining out here. Give it a few minutes and it'll stop draining out. Next thing you're going to want to do is remove the oil filter. And I like using these band style wrenches for doing that. They seem to slip the least amount. So once your filter's off, you're going to need a filter cutter. And it's basically a giant can opener. CAT makes their own. You can get them in other places. All sorts of places. Here's the CAT part number for this one. And the reason I'm going to be using a CAT one is because most of the ones that are made aftermarket don't open past 5 inches, and CAT oil filters are about 5 1/4 inches wide. So once you have your filter off, you're going to put it in a vise. And the vise is there to hold the filter in place while you use your giant can opener, aka oil filter cutter, to basically cut the top of it off. And that will let you get to the filtering element. So basically you're just going to put it on there, tighten the clamp, and there's 2 cutters and 2 rollers, and you're just going to roll it around. Now, normally once it breaks through the outer steel housing, it's going to lock up because the cutters have cut through the steel in certain spots and haven't cut through in other spots. So this spot gets a little tough. Now, CAT filters seem to be a little thicker than most of the aftermarket ones like Baldwin and Donaldson, and they take a little bit longer to cut, which in my opinion is a good thing, because if you have a rock or something hit your oil filter while you're driving down the road, you probably want a thicker case. So, okay, we have broken the outer case and we are ready to remove the filter element. So all you have to do is loosen up on the vise a little bit, and then the filter element should pop out of there. Now, if you've seen my other filter videos, you know that this is a CAT filter, and the dirt should be caught on the outside of the filter because that is the dirty side of the filter. And you see this little banding. A lot of aftermarket filters do not have this banding that helps keep the filter media in place. And you're going to be using wear some gloves here, and you basically want to be using a box cutter. That is probably the best tool for the job here. You can use a knife as well, anything really sharp, but box cutters work best because they have a uniform blade size, so when you're cutting it won't bind up. And we're going to cut a large chunk, about 1/4 of the filter media out. And then you're going to squish the oil out. So you're basically going to just pick a couple of the slots and cut them out. You're going to have to do it across the slots as well. And it's not an extremely tough material, so once you cut it through, even if there's a little left, you should be able to pull it apart. So we've cut most of it, and we're just going to pop it out. All right, so now we're ready to inspect it. And you can already see there's some metal debris there in that media. So we're going to need to go back to our vise here, and we're going to squish the oil out of this filter media. And that's to basically get all the oil out so you can inspect the element more, and it will be a little bit less messy. Now, always put a bucket or a trash can under this because there's a lot of oil left in this media. So basically just squish it out, and then you're going to slide. I always put a trash can under, and you just slide the oil into there, or a drain bucket, and then wipe it off. And then you will be able to inspect the media for metal. Now, with this engine have a very low oil pressure and a knock, I suspected we would find quite a bit of metal. And you're going to see that I was not wrong. That is all metal. Do you see there at the bottom of each little valley? That's a lot of metal. If you have ever cut a filter open with no engine damage, you might see a flake here or there. That's fairly normal, but this is extremely excessive. So this is the filter cutting portion is over, but if you want to see what happened to this engine, stay tuned. So pulled the oil pan next, and this is what we found. There is just debris and junk all over the place. Big pieces. Some of these pieces were over an inch long. And this engine obviously is at a major failure. You can see some of the debris is piled up in the corner. So what you're looking at here is your number 2 main bearing cap. And if you look at it closely, there's a heat ring in the cap where the dark and the light portions of the metal are. You see it there? That indicates that this bearing cap has friction in it and most likely a spun main bearing. This is not normal. This is most likely all the metal and the cause of the knock and the low oil pressure. I'll show you a picture of another main bearing cap. So this is one of the other main bearing caps. It does not have that heat ring in it, which would indicate it hasn't been spun on this main bearing. It's the other one with the heat ring. So this is an easy way to tell, so you don't have to pull all your mains or all your rods. Look for one that has any heat distortion in it. So here's with the cap removed, and you can see that heat ring. It's obviously had a lot of friction and a lot of heat that has caused that heat ring. So lo and behold, we had a spun main bearing. You can see the damage to the crankshaft. Since it's a main bearing, it's also going to have damage to the block. So this is going to need at least machining and machining to the crank, or a new crank and a new block. These are what the main bearings look like. They had just totally spun, not reusable. You know, main bearings aren't very expensive unless they fail, and then you're looking at basically a new engine. So with this amount of damage, that explains where the metal came from. And, cutting the filter open helped us diagnose this, because if we'd found no metal in that filter, which obviously we did find metal, we might have looked somewhere else for the knock. Okay? Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it.